the last academic session. We do have
Okay.
a performance after this.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is the last paper presentation panel as well. Great, so we're live on YouTube now. And let me, Okay, so welcome everyone. Welcome back from the break. We're delighted to host our final paper presentation now at the Education in Crisis Conference. These are paper presentations on issues of education in South Asia from around the region. The theme of this session today is methods, and the presentations will be chaired by Nimesh Tungana from the London School of Economics. Each panelist will present their work for 10 minutes, followed by 5 minutes of audience Q&As. So I hope that all of you who are here with us on Zoom will send us your questions on chat. If you're watching us on YouTube Live, please send us your questions on the live chat function as well, and we'll make sure we address them at the end of every presentation. So thank you again for being here, and thank you for staying with us these 2 days. We're almost at the end of this conference now. I hope you'll stay on even after this for our final closing speech and a very exciting performance by young spoken word artists from around South Asia who'll be performing their poetry on themes of education. So Nimesh, I'll hand over to you now, and we'll let the session begin. Thank you so much for chairing the session for us.
Yeah, thanks, Moini, for inviting me. And welcome, everyone.
We can't see you. Is your video?
All right, okay. Sorry, let me just...
No problem.
Okay, sorry about that. I thought it was
Great. Perfect.
Everyone. Hi again. So thanks, Moini, for inviting me, first of all, and welcome everyone to this last session, but very important on where we'll be talking about methods, some different epistemological and pedagogical approaches to education in South Asia in the context of pandemic. And we have 4 very exciting papers for today, as you've already probably seen in the program schedule. So basically my role as a chair is quite straightforward, and it's made further simple by Mohini. So we have 10 minutes presentation for each presenter. We will try to take a couple of questions, maybe just clarifying questions for each presenter. And then, if we have time at the end of the session, we can just bring all the questions and comments for a round of discussion. So that is basically the plan. I will be keeping time, of course, and hope we'll be able to finish on time, 10 minutes. But if it is looking like if it is going beyond 10, I'll just kindly request you to wrap up. So basically, without further ado, I would like to invite our first presenter for today, Disari Chatterjee and Arya Parakate Vijayaraghavam from Christ University, Bangalore. And the paper is entitled Digital Shift in Education, a phenomenological study on learners' experience of mobility in the context of the pandemic. Over to you, Disari and Arya, and you have 10 minutes, please.
Thank you so much, Nimesh. So with your permission, we would like to share our screen.
Please go ahead. Yeah, I think you should be able to do that, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I hope my screen is visible.
Yeah, you're
okay.
Great.
Yeah. Thank you. All right. Thank you for that introduction. So the title of our presentation is Digital Shift in Education. So just to give a brief context of our study is situated at Christ University, where both of us are assistant professor at the Department of English and Cultural Studies. So this is a private university at the southern Indian city of Bangalore. So with the lockdown and the entire world moving to emergency remote learning situation, our university also for the fall semester in 2020 moved to this entirely online learning situation. But what happened in 2021, the spring semester of 2021, the students were given an option to continue their education in the hybrid mode, right? So as a result of which, what we see in the last 1 year is basically, I'm sorry.
Are you not able to move the presentation?
Yes, I think it's fine now. Yeah. Okay, I'm sorry for that. So yeah, like this kind of digital disruption, even the entire process of education or entire process of learning itself was disrupted in the last 1 year. So as well, towards the end of last year, we thought that we would go ahead and document the experiences of our learner. So the first thing we wanted to do by this kind of analysis is we wanted to analyze the impact of this multiple spatial shift on the nature of learners and their experiences of learning. Further, we also wanted to document this various experiences of mobility, and we wanted to see how the perception of the formal learning spaces have changed. And by saying that, we actually wanted to focus a lot on the perception of online learning space as such, because throughout the conference so far, we have discussed how, whether we like it or not, we're actually moving towards a very, very digitalized mode of education as such. So we wanted to see what kind of experience our learners had after they kind of had an experience of learning in all these three, physical classroom, online, and hybrid mode. We wanted to actually locate these experiences of mobility to kind of figure out what kind of impact it has, on the future of higher education in India, or what kind of, we also wanted, the larger question for us was to see whether mobility paradigm will in a way kind of change, the contemporary educational scenario as such. So moving on, when we started this particular project in the November of 2020, initially there was like very few research when we were doing the literature review, and mostly the research talked about the digital divide as such, which I think have also been a very important or major trajectory of discussion in this particular conference, where we saw a range of presentations on socioeconomic disparity, on digital lack of digital infrastructure, policy changes that might be required, and institutional support. As also we also engaged with this question of university as an equitable space. But our study, kind of falls into the second paradigm of pedagogy and experience. So when we were doing our literature review, we could locate a few studies on instructors' perspective, whereby the instructors were discussing how they were not digitally prepared in order to, kind of give online classes, and how classroom management was a different kind of ball game altogether, right? But then when we went to see how learners' experiences were getting documented, we saw there is very limited literature or very limited engagements on that front. And that is exactly where our study, or the findings of our ongoing study, I should put it, features. So now I would invite Arya to kind of discuss the theoretical underpinning of the study.
Thank you, Dishari. So when we look at this project and understanding the learner's experience of mobility across various spaces, three focal points are something which is, three theoretical focal points are there. One is learning space. So here, conventionally, learning is largely understood as, space is largely understood as a setting or as an architectural element. So Temple says that largely it is understood as a resource to be managed for effective teaching and learning, right? And so largely it is also understood as a passive setting. So in this particular work, we largely look at space as mediated through objects, through spatial practices. And therefore, the work of Lebewoff on social production of space is something which is very insightful for us. So we look at space as socially and relationally constructed. At the same time, Ponty's understanding of how bodily experiences of space and spatial practices also becomes very important. Moving further, the spatial studies is very strongly interconnected with mobility as well. And when we look at the movement across and within these spaces, it's also important to engage with Uri's understanding. Here, Uri's work on mobilities and 5 modes of mobility, largely about corporeal movement, physical movement, communicative movement, imaginative movement, digital movement, are something which is very insightful. And at the same time, it is also something which learners as well as facilitators do at that particular point of time. So there is a very strong interconnectedness between all of these modes, and this makes our learning experience and spatial practices in this space also something which is very important. Another philosophical underpinning is largely based on phenomenology, where we look at interpretative phenomenology, where we IPA as a double hermeneutic process. So largely it comes from the schools of thoughts of Heidegger, who engages with interpretation as a critical process to understand being in the world, right? and being in the world is relationally and reciprocally constructed. Another point of engagement was also Pointy's work on phenomenology of perception, where body is embodied and how bodily experience also becomes very, very important to understand space. Further, I request Dishari to continue with methodological approaches.
Yeah, so this is definitely from what Arya described. It was definitely a qualitative study which involved interpretive phenomenological approach as a mode. So we conducted semi-structured and open-ended interviews with our learners. So our participants, essentially, we were closely working with 20 postgraduate and undergraduate students in our department. And the ethical clearance for our study was provided by our ethics review committee of our university. And the nature of participation was voluntary. We approached our learners and we told them that we would like to document your experience. Are you okay with that? And when they provided us written consent, we went ahead to do this particular study. So in terms of how we elicited the data, so me and Arya, we both used to conduct interviews on a regular basis. And the interviews used to be conducted on Google Meet. So both of us were present during the course of the interview to make sure that our individual biases did not make an impact on the kind of responses we got. And finally, when it came to data explication as such, we first made verbatim transcriptions of these interviews, post which we did a lot of individual readings of the learners' experiences. And then we came back and discussed, debated, and finally, through consensus building, it was a very strenuous process of consensus building. We kind of arrived at a few patterns, and we are going to talk about the 4 most dominating patterns which emerged out of it. So Arya, could you please come in?
Yes. So when we talk about emerging patterns, there were some very interesting patterns which will emerge. One of the very first one was openness towards online learning spaces. While the learners also spoke about limits and laws for the physical space or the online setting, offline setting as such, there was also a sense of understanding of freedom and independence in online space. Further, there was also an understanding of hybrid as a limiting space, in the sense that the students who joined online felt neglected. At the same time, they also found it very disorienting to adopt to the spatial practices required for 2 different modes, which is complete online and complete offline. And enhance peer interaction and self-awareness. So that is another aspect which we looked at, in the sense that it was also understood that there was a increasing relevance for peer interaction, and also certain kinds of awareness on how they learn and what they learn and how would they trace certain kinds of sources. Also interesting was to note that the crisis here became a means of community building. So students had a conscious effort to build their own community based on shared lived experiences of being in a challenging time and space, right? So there was an enhanced empathy and compassion that we are in this together. Moving forward, Dishari will come in and talk about the voices of learners.
So definitely we had a lot of quotes, because we kind of are conducting this study over a period of time, but just a few quotes which we would like to highlight. One is on the online space. So this person, Nigel, obviously these are all pseudonyms. So this person is a postgraduate student, and he says, the most positive aspect I find about this online thing is that we do have the freedom, a certain level of freedom to engage with the classes. For example, in my case, I do feel a little restless in classes. So I'm in an online scenario, I feel I'm less monitored, and that gives me a sense of freedom. Coming to hybrid space, so this is from a learner who came back in the spring semester of 2021 to do physical hybrid classes. So she says, the students who are there on campus are more advantaged because we have immediate response. But then when it's like online students have to contribute, it's a several process for them to wait for our turn to be over. And then if they want to say anything spontaneously, it's not possible for them. So I think as a class overall, it should either be completely online or completely offline. With respect to responses and everything, I do feel that it's kind of delayed for people who are attending online hybrid classes. And in terms of their awareness about learning and that community building aspect which emerged out of COVID, this is a very interesting response from an undergraduate student of English, Adya. So she says, it's all because of the difficulties that we have been imposed on us by the pandemic. Individualistic learning was more possible during pre-pandemic times. But now that we are all imposed by challenges, the only source of help that we have is each other. We rely on each other, take each other's support, and help to get through these tough times. So now I would request Arya to conclude our presentation.
So some of the very interesting observations which are also relevant to this kind of conference where we are rethinking education is, one is that while there are challenges there are challenges in terms of online learning spaces, we also found that there is a better acceptance towards online learning spaces. So this largely emerges from the idea that now the learners have experienced both physical spaces as physical or offline setting, but at the same time online setting and hybrid setting. So there is a relational construction of this post mobility across and within these spaces. Then there is a certain kind of degree of preference toward and skepticism towards both physical as well as online classes, in the sense that both the learners felt that let's say the physical space or the offline setting was no more considered as the sole conducive space. So there were positives and negatives for both the spaces. And another aspect was also the flexibility which was associated with online. Another interesting observation which we found little interesting is that unlike the conventional understanding of hybrid space as a best practice of inclusion of the best practices of both online as well as hybrid mode, it largely was contradictory in terms of experience of the learners, who pointed out that they found it very, very difficult to cope up with the spatial practices which were required for both the modes. So there were a better acceptance towards complete offline and as well as complete online mode. Another interesting aspect was also in terms of the role of the changing role of classroom actors, in the sense that if initially probably the instructor was at the center of the class and would let's say instruct the entire or lead the entire discussion, now there was a larger emphasis on peer learning as well. So the learners also reported a certain kinds of change in their learning practices. For instance, now they were more confident in terms of that they could find their own digital resources or quickly type in if they didn't know certain kinds of words or terminologies which they were not familiar with. So apart from that, there was a conscious knowledge building or knowledge-based community building which was also made. And this was not something which was there was an intervention by the professors, but rather it was largely done by the students themselves through WhatsApp groups and other Facebook, other social medias as such. So to conclude, what we would say is that when we look at learning spaces, we look at effective learning and what kind of spaces are relevant. It is also important to engage with spaces specifically. At the same time, the mobility which has brought about the possibility to experience these kinds of spaces as well. And that could take us a little better into understanding how education also could be rethought. On that note, we would like to conclude this particular presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dishari and Arya, for that really interesting presentation. So any questions, clarifying questions to the presenters, anything? We can also come back to questions or you can pose your questions on the chat box and we'll monitor them and come back. So there is actually a question from Indramani Shrestha, outstanding research and outcomes. However, what about the challenges faced by the teachers while taking the online classes? So how did the researchers capture these issues? You want to take that question, Dishari?
Yeah, sure. I think both of us, since both of us were professors also of these students, definitely, in the beginning, if we talk about our lived experiences, it was fraught with a lot of challenges, right? First is, I think, this concept of space and how not everyone has this entire room to ourselves. We always get interrupted and there is a problem. And then also another thing is that we were always trained in a way that we could deliver content in physical classrooms. All our activities were designed in a way which involved corporeality or, the physical presence of students. So we were not getting all those things. So I think we had to kind of really do a lot of work in terms of content creation and content generation. So, everyone says that with this pandemic, teachers' role has kind of increased, enhanced manifolds, right? And we totally agree with that. We are just no longer teachers. We are pedagogues. We are developing content and we are trying to make, any kind of content we provide as interactive as possible. So me and Arya, it so happens over and over again now, we kind of have this entire hours dedicated in one particular week where we will just sit and design asynchronous activities, because we just want to make it meaningful both for us as well as our learners. So yeah, and if Arya wants to add anything to this, I guess.
I think that's it, and I think there are a lot of discussion in and around that aspect also in in this conference itself. So another interesting aspect is also the sense of time, and I think as pedagogues, I guess we all know that this. I think the shift to online has also brought in this this tragedy of how do we make sense of time, because we don't know when our working hours starts as begins and when it ends. So that kind of a discussion is also definitely there. So that's so all of those were challenging aspects, but at the same time, I think the experience of being in a corporeal in a physical space and then in an online, both has its positives and negatives. That's how I would like to look at it.
There is one more question from Matluba Khan, but I guess we can come back to in the interest of time, because it's an important question, but we can maybe come back once we are done with all the presentation and come back, because it's an important question on agency, teachers agency, which kind of nicely builds on the first presentation question. But let's move to the second presentation for today, which is from colleagues from Kathmandu University School of Education. So Roshni Rajbangshi, Vinod Prasad Pant, Parvati Dungana, Sanjay Kumar Pant, Balchandra Kunuchel, and the paper is entitled Arts in STEM-based workshop for teaching material development. Roshni, are you going to go with the presentation? Okay, you're ready.
Yes, thank you. Can you share, look at
this? I think you probably need to sort of maximize your.
Okay, I don't think I can go.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Nimesh, and thank you, the organizer, for giving us this platform. The topic of our presentation is Arts in a STEM-based workshop for teaching material development. And we are some of the co-authors, and it's a developing paper. So we just started this paper, and I'm hoping to get more feedback so we can improve this paper. So to start this presentation, I would say that STEM, very little research has been done on the STEM workshop, and with plenty of benefits on the STEM workshop. As the research shows that the STEM workshop provides growing opportunity for the teachers, and it also provides information on the accessibility of teaching and learning materials. It provides hands-on activity and engage the learners. So we also, with the same thought, we also organized this workshop to the teachers, and this workshop mainly highlights the integration of arts to deliver the STEM concept. Saying this, I would also like to say that art is very important in the STEM field. In one of the presentation, one of the presenters said that the students after the crisis, when they come back to the classroom, they should not be directed directly into the curriculum. They should not be. They should be given some time and space for them so that they can get into the rituals of the classroom. So I would say that arts can be a very beneficial for that one, and it gives it can be used to fulfill that gap so that the students can come back to their schedule. So we also focused on 3 outcomes for this from this STEM workshop. So they are material development, STEM mini project development, and hands-on activity. So just to give you a little background, Rupantaran, which means transformation, is conducting some research in some of the schools of with this municipality, and this is one of the schools where we are doing the research. And then the teachers of this school were actually called for the STEM workshop, and we'll talk this in the methodology section. So some of the projects of Rupantaran are like professional development for the teachers, the STEM workshop, STEM education, eco-san, and mushroom farming, gardening, and more. There are more. So to do this kind of research, especially the master's student and fields, PhD and postdoc scholars are engaged at various levels with different kind of stakeholders, means with the students, SMC PTA and teachers, principals, and then also with the community members and parents. Okay, so what is the purpose of this paper or presentation is to explore the use of arts in STEM in a STEM-based workshop, and also explore the effectiveness of this STEM-based workshop among the teachers of the community of the municipality. What is the theoretical framework that we are now focusing is the transformational learning theory, and transformation learning brings change in the perspective of individuals, and also individuals to participate in critical reflection. This forces to acquire the reflective judgment. For instance, in this workshop, what we did is that the participant as well as the researchers, that are we, in this workshop part, elaborated our existing point of view, that is like the content as well as the pedagogies, and also we involved in the discussion so that we can establish new point of view, and that brought transformation not only on the teachers but also on the researchers. Saying that, I would like to hand over to Parvati so she can continue. Parvati, ma'am.
Thank you, Rosni. I'm going to share about methodology. Overall, we have conducted this research under participatory inquiry paradigm, and it has multiple ways of knowing, like experiential, presentational, propositional, and practical ways of knowing. So we are using multiple ways of knowing within this paradigm. And regarding the research design, participatory action research is the research design, and it has the cycle like planning, action, reflection, and observation. And our research has multiple cycles. So within this paradigm, we have conducted the research, and our method is workshop. Workshop is the major method here. And regarding the co-researchers, along with we authors, there are 18 community school teachers of a Nepali school. So we are the co-researchers of the research. And our data are in the teaching learning materials which are developed by the teachers, observation, reflective journals, videos, poetry, songs. So there are so many data resources with us, and we are using dialogue as a major meaning making process, and it's going on. We are continuously in the dialogue with the teachers and along with the researchers and the authors. So we have been conducting, as Rosni said, it's going on. So particularly our research has 3 stages. First, it was the planning for the workshop, like researchers had the planning session with the teachers regarding the workshop. Then in stage 2, we had participatory learning. So the workshop has a 3 days program. On the first day, the teachers along with the researcher, they had their teaching learning materials development activities on the first day. On the second day, teacher developed STEAM-based projects, and on the third day, they implemented and they discuss on the implementation and reflection. Actually, each days had the cycle like planning, action, reflection, and observation. Based on the planning, the first day activities were conducted, and based on the reflection of the first day, second day's planning, action, and reflection was carried out similarly to the third day. And finally, it was a meaning making process, and which we are in the process, and based on the learnings, and we are continuing our activities in the school. Thank you. Now I request Vinod to continue this presentation.
Thank you so much, Rosni ma'am and Parvati ma'am, and then thank you Nimesh and the organizer. So now let me continue the same the presentations of the same paper. So the context is clear that we organize a workshop, and the purpose of workshop is to prepare STEAM-based projects and then encourage teachers to use those projects in their school setting. And now there are some of the key findings that just I want to share, because due to the time constraints. So the first important part is that our teachers, they realize that the arts has the aesthetic value. So not only the language teachers, but also the teachers who teach science and mathematics, and who have never realized that arts can be integrated in the so-called dry subjects of science and maths. They realize that it has aesthetic value, and then it has capacity to heal the wounds. And then and especially since there are different forms of arts, our focus on this particular workshop was on visual arts and the performing arts. So under visual arts, we focus more on painting, and then under performing arts, we focus more on stories and dramas. And then what we did, we encouraged them to prepare some stories and some drama to deliver the lessons in the classroom. And the next one is the very interesting part is that, so those form of arts, that is visual arts and performing arts, it helps teachers and as well as the students, once they implement those in the schools, to refine that the knowledge, attitudes, and the practice as well. Because if we just deliver the ideas, and then some of the teachers may get the new kind of knowledge, but when they realize that arts is a very important aspect, and they gradually they refine in their practice level. And the next important aspect is that development of STEAM project, because one of the major focus of this project was to help teachers to prepare the STEAM project, because we are not working as a so-called expert. Since this is a participatory action research, we always encourage them, and we always invited them to use their own assets and to use their own perspective in STEAM project. And what happened when they develop those STEAM projects, teachers develop STEAM projects, especially in the gardening related activities, and then this mushroom farming is going on. And then they also prepare some of the projects in hydroponics. And the most important part is that, so when they prepare those projects, so it created a kind of rich environment towards cross-disciplinary learning. So before this, the teachers used to take that learning can happen only in their own domain, only in their own discipline. For example, if a teacher teaches mathematics, so they deal with only mathematical content only. So is the case of science. But whenever we invited them to use these STEAM projects, so they started to identify the common platform where they can use this cross-disciplinary learning. And so through the help of those cross-disciplinary learning, so they started to introduce the different concept of science, technology, and the engineering. And one of the major important aspect of this development of STEAM project is that, so we are not dealing only with the subject-centric knowledge. So once they become engaged in those projects, so the soft skills, where some of the people call transversal skills or 21st century skills, such as problem-solving skills and design thinking approach, it also goes the side by side, I think. And then they become very much helpful in preparing this creative and then critical students. Next one is, okay, the next important aspect is that this is teaching materials development. So although the previous this STEAM project was also one kind of teaching materials, but moving ahead from that STEAM projects, we collaborated our school teachers to use this design thinking approach, especially in teaching language, maths, and science, because there are a lot of issues in school education in Nepal and perhaps around the globe. And then, so we do not have ready-made solutions so for the better, so-called better teaching and learning approach. And then since we are from different cultures, and then our students come from different background, and we have to use a kind of design thinking approach to solve that the complex issues or the complex context of the scenario. So for that, the teachers develop very hands-on materials for meaningful learning. As I said earlier, they develop stories. And the most interesting part is that, so one of the mathematics teachers who was very much passionate in songs, and then he started to connect that songs in teaching mathematics. So previously he used to take the songs as one of his passion, but later on he realized that I can also integrate the songs in mathematics teaching and learning. So this created enough space for incorporating that is soft skills and the hard skills. So so some of the examples are here. For example, in this particular activities, the teachers were grouped in four different groups, and then we asked them to prepare. This is a marble run game, and then who can prepare and then better games, and then and what they did, they use a lot of mathematical ideas there. They used a lot of scientific skills, and at the same time, the cooperations, the collaborations, and leadership matter a lot, because some of the teachers say that in our group nobody took the leadership, so we could not make a very good marble round race. And then what they realized that, so even to make a small game in the workshops, so there should be a good sense of cooperations, good sense of collaborations and leaderships, apart from having this is math, science, and language related skills. So if we are interested to uplift the pedagogical approach in schools, so there should be a connections between this is math, science, language skills, together with collaborations, cooperations, and leadership. So this is what the students the teachers started to realize. So finally, the conclusion is that hands-on activities with arts integrations, it fosters creativity and innovations, not only to the teachers, to the students as well. And the arts, it is not only a pedagogical approach. So over the period of time, if you use arts, it helps students to refine their knowledge, attitudes, and practice of different subjects. And because the arts it's not only a universal phenomenon, because arts can be taken from students' own cultural artifacts, and they develop a kind of sense of belongingness. So whenever you use painting, so that is very much popular in their own local areas, and they start to realize that, so there is a maths in my painting, so there is a science in our painting, which are found in our community. So it makes that is what we call the cultural ways of knowing. So they use a lot of cultural artifact, and the arts creates a very rich learning environment. And one of the most important aspect is that we always foster for critical pedagogy. We are not only delivering knowledge, and we are not only demonstrating the skills. So we invite teachers and students to critically look the practices that are going around the schools or around the community, and how can we change those injustice practices in the community. So for that, the arts is very much useful. Arts means stories, drama, and then painting. So this is our conclusion. So this is a list of references. So thank you so much. So thank you for all audiences.
Great. Thanks, Vinod, and thanks everyone who participated in this really innovative paper and study. Any specific questions? Any pressing question to the presenters? Again, we have time. We can also come back to this. One question I had, since we didn't have any question, we don't have any question yet, to the presenter. Is it? I probably must have missed that, but is it something that built this particular study, the participatory action research that you conducted? Does it build on the pre-existing network that you have with the participants, or is it something that was more induced by the pandemic that it made it necessary to do it? Like, to what extent it is part of your pre-existing networks and your work, and to what extent it is when sort of triggered by the pandemic? Could you reflect on that, just to see that if this kind of innovative approach, did it come from the pandemic? Is it necessitated by the pandemic, or created by the pandemic, or is it something that is built on your pre-existing? Could you, anyone, Parvati,
I'd like to say something on this one.
Yeah.
Then later on, my friends can add to it. What happened is that this workshop was right after the pandemic. We had the lockdown for a long time, and also during the lockdown period also. Let me say that Rupantaran, we have been doing the research before the pandemic started, and after pandemic happened and there was a lockdown in our country, so we closed all our activities. But what we did is, like, during the lockdown time also, Rupantaran, Vinod sir, and some other students, we conducted like online workshop for the teachers. So during the pandemic, we took the benefit of this pandemic, and we did a workshop for the teachers so that we can teach them some technology, how to use technology in the classroom, and some presentation skills and other things. And also, like this workshop was right after the lockdown and before the second wave started. So we took the benefit of this workshop. So you can see in the pictures that the teachers are wearing masks. And we were kind of very worried that this would not infect any of the teachers. So probably nothing happened, but yes, that is what happened. So Binod sir, can you add, would you like to add something to it?
Just in one sentence, although we started the project before the pandemic, but we kept on refining or revisiting the activities, since it is a participatory action research, because in the previous we did not have such kind of activities. And what we realized that we need such kind of activity during these pandemic sessions, and then we discussed in a group, and then we just revised the activity and we conducted.
Okay, great. Thanks, Roshni and Binod. So we'll move on to the third paper for today, which is by Matluba Khan and Anand from Cardiff University. And their paper is entitled "Towards a Blended Learning Framework for Post-Pandemic Bangladesh." So over to you, Matluba and Kusha.
Thank you, Nimesh. Thank you, the organizer, for this opportunity to be here. I'll share the slides now. Can you see the correct slide? Sorry. Can you hear me?
Not yet. We can hear you, but we cannot see the slide yet. So can you? I think it's, yeah, it's up.
Okay, great. And it's the correct slide.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, great. Yeah,
yeah.
It's correct. It looks perfect. Great. Yeah, carry on.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm Dr. Matluba Khan from Cardiff University. I'm a lecturer at Cardiff University, and I'll be sharing this presentation with Dr. Kusha Anand, who is a research associate at Cardiff University. Okay. Sorry, it's just, I don't know why it's not letting me change the slide. Yeah, so as we have seen and during the past presentations and experienced that education systems in low-income countries like Bangladesh and other countries in South Asia have rapidly responded in the COVID-19 pandemic with extremely limited resources, resulting in adaptive and unique approaches to teaching and learning. Overnight, teachers around the world are expected to innovate technologically, socially, and sometimes teachers were left on their own devices. With less than 50% people having access to internet in countries of Global South, we have seen a lot of new solutions emerge for learning at home and outside the walls of the classroom. And as you can see here, examples from Kashmir, which another colleague yesterday shared during a panel. So with this background, like the presentation outline here would be, we'll present the findings from a GCRF funded project, which investigated the spatialities of education during the time of the crisis, how affordances in physical and digital spaces for education have changed over the course of the pandemic, and what can be learned from this, not just for crisis situations, but for the non-crisis as well. So I'll share the project findings from the review, and then I'll hand it over to my colleague, Dr. Kusha Anand. In our review, we have looked back to learn how countries responded during earlier pandemics. The Open Air School movement was launched in Germany in 1904 when classes were taught in the surrounding forest, and in the early 20th century, open air schools became fairly common in Northern Europe in the period up to World War I. Even in the early years of 20th century, when tuberculosis ravaged American cities, the brick buildings were converted into space with ceiling height windows on every side, kept open at nearly all times. And we have also seen during the COVID-19 pandemic, some countries and cities have dramatically expanded their outdoor learning environments. In Denmark and Scotland, community parks are being reserved for young children during school hours to accommodate outdoor learning. And even in Global South, schools are considering outdoor learning as an alternative or a complement to remote learning. And as you can see, outdoor learning has potential as a great solution for students, not only during the pandemic, but also afterwards, especially those in rural areas and poorly funded government or private schools who have struggled to attend classes online due to connectivity and issues and shortage of phones in a single household. So although outdoor learning is core to the history and culture of the Indian subcontinent, it hasn't been widely practiced in post-independent India, Pakistan, or Bangladesh, other than Shantiniketan, where outdoor learning is the mainstream. Between 2012 and 2015, I co-designed outdoor classrooms with children and the community in 2 primary schools in Bangladesh, and evaluated the impact on children's learning, health, and well-being. And the research provides evidence that children got better marks learning outside compared to children who were taught traditionally in their classroom environment. So when we are focusing mostly on access to education and keeping in touch with children during the pandemic, we definitely should not forget about the quality of education that the subcontinent has been struggling for quite some time. So in this background, this project, Crisis-Led Approaches to Teaching and Learning in Bangladesh, aims to inform policy through developing a framework to combine digital learning with outdoor learning for primary education in Bangladesh, to mitigate the impact of the pandemic, but also to improve children's educational and well-being outcomes in the longer term. And we wanted to learn the voices from teachers, children and parents, how they coped with the situation during the pandemic, how they managed to continue education during this time. And we also conducted a case study of several promising teaching practices that has emerged during the pandemic. So the key findings from the review was basically that there is no one-size-fits-all approach. And there is not enough evidence of blended learning approach in primary school settings, which we need to address at this point. So in this presentation, we'll share the findings from the telephone survey with 200 primary school teachers who participated during April and May 221. We collected quantitative and qualitative data on approaches to remote learning. The majority of participants were female, which represent that majority of the female teachers in the primary education sector in Bangladesh. Among the participants, majority were in the age group of 35 to 44, and also the majority were from government primary schools in Bangladesh. Even before, our data reveals that before the pandemic, 60% of the school had laptops or desktop in their schools, but only 23% of the schools have schoolyard in urban areas in Bangladesh. 90% of schools do not have any open spaces. And we also found that 46% of teachers were using some format of outdoor space, and 36% have never utilized the spaces around. And the principal mode of teaching during the pandemic was smartphone, where 85% of the teachers used a smartphone. And in addition to Zoom, they innovatively used Facebook and Messenger and email to deliver remote teaching. So at this point, I'd hand over to Dr. Kusha Anand, who will present the findings, qualitative findings from the survey.
Thank you, Dr. Matluba Khan. So we broadly categorized the findings from the first wave of qualitative research into 4 key themes as displayed on your screen in the slide. Teachers' perceptions of the affordances of digital and physical space, teachers' views of the impact of learning on children and families, teachers' strategies to mitigate and or address some of these challenges. Finally, teachers' views on blended outdoor learning and aspirations for future. I will go through these key themes briefly in the following slides. Next slides, please. So affordances of digital or physical space. Affordances, what do we mean by that? As coined by Gibson in 1979, refer to those qualities of the environment that offer opportunities, in this case, both physical or digital, for different activities such as teaching and learning. Affordances are also the measures of the interfaces where technological or spatial potential meets human interaction and desire, in this case, teachers. Various technologies and spaces can offer boundaries and structure to these activities, shaping the nature and limitations of the activity as well. So here we will refer to the affordances of teaching and learning as cognitive affordances. In Bangladesh, like other countries in the global south, there are several sets of digital resources offered by the government. It includes videos of teaching, digital editions of textbooks, and links to other such material. Most teachers shared with us that they are teaching online without proper training and therefore are facing problems in using these digital tools and the resources available, as we know, across the globe. But teachers also shared that teaching through these digital resources or tools had been reduced to just one-way delivery with little or no personal contact and engagement. However, we found these few teachers shared their affordances of digital and outdoor spaces for pedagogical purposes. As you can see in the first quote on your screen, teacher is using both digital and outdoor spaces for teaching and learning, and most importantly, reaching out to the children or students from low socioeconomic status with little or no digital devices. And in the second quote, a teacher designed her own design studio to not only to reach out these children, but also helping other teachers teach innovatively. Next slide, please. Teachers also shared that there is a lack of space and digital devices that's affecting these children negatively. Most of our participants shared that student doesn't have enough space and digital devices for online classes. So overall, the home environment is having a very negative impact on their learning. Next slide, please. When we ask more questions about their learning and assessment, due to these spatial issues and distractions, such as lack of infrastructure, students are unable to focus or concentrate. As you can see in the first quote on the slide, noise of televisions or other distractions in their home environment is affecting their level of focus. Even if they ask their elders to shut down TV, they're being told not to say so. So this teacher also shared that parents do not care about the learning environment that they request them to do. However, overall, what we found that the home environment or the home indoor spatial is causing really negative impact on these children. Next slide, please. We also asked teachers about their strategies to mitigate these challenges, and teachers mentioned that their head teachers or colleagues or principal support really helped them to continue. In order to mitigate these challenges of space or lack of digital resources, a teacher shared that she's practicing house yard teaching. Shared that this practice with other teachers as well. They mainly advocate that spending time outside or in outdoors teaches children to be curious, resilient, and persistent. Overall, this practice provide opportunities for teachers for a blended experience and also for children to mitigate some of the challenges they are facing in their indoor learning. These lessons take place weekly over the term in Bangladesh and also include options for activities ranging from mapping to creating artwork and storytelling. Next slide, please. When we ask about the possibility of implementing blended outdoor learning, teachers expressed their concern about the security of students and permission from school authorities. In addition, they mentioned because of the large class size, it is very hard for them to manage regular classes, and taking them outside will add another major challenge to them. However, pedagogically, teachers mentioned that it can increase the engagement level and could be appropriate for a few subjects, as this teacher mentioned in the first quote, such as Bangla, religion, and Bangladesh, and global studies. Next slide, please. So what are teachers' aspirations for the way forward? Mainly around parental involvement and school involvement in implementing this outdoor learning framework or practice. As we saw in the teaching practice, that it can increase attention span and engagement. As this teacher mentioned in this code, it's outdoor learning not included in the current regulations. If it is included, then we can try it. It can increase attention span is that I can't take kids outside unless it is required to do it. I think that if the principal tells us to do so, then we can try to use outdoor methods. So these are some of the teachers' voices from our first wave of qualitative data collection. I'll stop here and now hand over to Dr. Khan, who will share the recommendations with you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Kusha. So based on this, the recommendations for policy and future research would be to make blended learning design appropriate to the context and improve teacher training opportunities so that they can utilize the affordances of digital and outdoor spaces. The outdoor and home learning spaces should be identified, studied, and integrated into learning where possible. And these also, the strategies also should be prepared in consultation with stakeholders, including teachers, children, and parents. And at this point, we also need experimentation and evaluation of blended learning in primary school settings to find out the effective strategies that could work not only during the crisis, but also following the crisis to improve the quality of education in post-pandemic South Asian countries. Thank you.
Thank you, Matluba, and for that interesting, particularly a mixed methods approach, and the strength of the both survey and qualitative methods really well highlighted. So any specific question, anything for the presenters? We understand that we don't have the last presenter. Farooq Abdullah is not here. Otherwise, it would have been nice to have a good, representation of Pakistan. So we have some 5 minutes to wrap up this session. So any question? First of all, to Matluba and Kusha, or just general question?
I had a question.
Sure.
Basically, what are your plans in future in terms of blended learning? I find that fascinating because I'm working on some technology project based on that. I would like to get some more information from you all, but I think the problem that is there that you mentioned that the out of school system, can you use it in out of school system, like out of course in a separate time? Can this be successful? Because I think the pandemic might be there, might go away, but the approach towards blended learning is a big problem because of the digital divide that is existing. So I want to make it short that what are the major problems that you're facing in terms of the digital divide and because smartphone even are not given to children. So there has to be someone always there to moderate that. So what are your successes and failure in that?
I can take on and anybody else can jump in. So I think that our research actually has stemmed from this understanding of the digital divide that exists, and that the pandemic has actually increase the pre-existing inequalities in the society. So the understanding of this blended learning as a combination of digital and outdoor learning can, as a solution to address the digital divide in Bangladesh. So we are proposing that as a solution. And we think that because it has already been tested, the potential for outdoor learning or outdoor learning environment has already been tested in previous research in the context of Bangladesh. So we think it could be implemented easily, where students who do not have access to smartphone or any other digital tools, they can come to the school in a regular basis. And this we can also, and the student who have access to certain online digital tools, and they can continue with their studies being at home, and that a combination of two can be implemented. Particularly, I think, where online education has been successful in the context of higher education settings, but it is particularly challenges for young children and primary school aged children who do not have a kind of longer attention span looking at online and not really so interactive teaching practices. So I think it is possible to bring them into the school year and have kind of format of interactive teaching, so socially distanced, which is quite easy, and the virus doesn't spread as fast in outdoors as it would be in an indoor environment with no access to ventilation. So I guess for us, the next step would be actually trying to develop innovative practices working with schools. So because it should be context specific. So working with teachers, children, and the community, which would work for particular schools and particular contexts. So to develop a framework and implementation strategy, working with several schools in Bangladesh, and then to see how we can scale it up and implement across Bangladesh or beyond Bangladesh, and develop a framework.
Sorry to interfere, but we are well past, almost past the scheduled time, and then the closing session is starting. So I'll have to sort of, we'll have to stop there in the interest of time. So thank you everyone for attending this. Really, first of all, thanks so much for this very fascinating set of papers, and thanks to the audience. Hope you can come to our other 3 sessions. We have a closing session starting promptly, and then hope you can stay for the rest of the other 2 sessions. So thank you so much, and hope you have a good day.
Thank you so much, Nimesh. Thank you for chairing this presentation so brilliantly and for being here, sparing your time. And thank you to all the presenters. This was really a great end to our paper presentation series. And we're so glad that we could get a chance to, have a glimpse into your research. And we hope that we'll find more ways to associate in the future as well. And I hope this was useful for you, just to have these discussions and present your work. So thank you again for participating in this conference. We're now going to move to room A. That's where our closing ceremony is now beginning. And then we have a young South Asian artist performance of poetry on education in South Asia as well, which we'll be ending our conference with. So please do join us. It'll be really good to have all of you there as we end our conference. And just thank you so much for being a part of our first edition of Education in Crisis. See you there. I've pasted the link on chat as well. And to all of you who are watching on YouTube, you can continue to watch the live stream.